to be here at Clarity because it's an awesome conference, and I feel like I'm hanging out with a giant theater of friends, which is the best kind of giant theater to be in. And there's going to be some really great talks at this conference this year. There's going to be some like life-changing, world-changing talks at this conference. This, however, is not one of those. I'm glad you think, no, that was supposed to be funny. Instead, we're going to totally nerd out about motion. So we can, I don't have any good exercises like Denise, but by the end of this talk, you will all be able to yell your favorite cubic Bezier function to your newfound friend next to you. I'm holding you to that. Yeah, so, we're going to nerd out about motion. So we do a lot of things with design where we plan messaging, right? We have a thing to say, we have a personality we're trying to express, something to make us stand out, to make our brands be unique, whatever it might be, because they are all unique in their own way. And we do things to be expressive with our design, with our type, our color, our layout, all of those things. And oftentimes we kind of forget about our other options like motion. I've been to a lot of design discussions or design crits where they're like, all right, we've picked a nice, heavy typeface to really show our strength, but with rounded corners, because we're not all like angles and stuff. And then a long discussion about the colors, and then the motion, they're like, and it moves. And that's it. But we could do so much more. And I know that motion really does say things, just like all of our other design tools do, sometimes even more. When we see things move as people, we just tend to project like human emotion and motivation on stuff that's moving, even when it's just squares and triangles and things, which is amazing that our brains do that, but also makes it kind of feel extra like we're letting our designs down when we just let them move however they might. Or if we go with like the default CSS curves or whatever else, that we're kind of leaving out this one piece that while we're paying attention to all these other things, we're leaving out this bit about motion. And I talk to a lot of designers about motion, partly because animation is my second favorite thing to talk about. First favorite thing is cute pet photos, but no one wants to hear a conference talk on that. So, or maybe we do. Wouldn't that be funny? Like, just kidding, puppies. No. Use that in your next meeting, though. But a lot of designers tell me that they're kind of afraid of motion. They feel like they don't know how to do it, or they're just not sure how to talk about it, or they've tried it and it just doesn't quite fit, and just something is wrong, so they just kind of gave up. And I totally get that, because motion design as an overall discipline, definitely complicated. But when we're talking about just kind of the UI animation, a kind of animation most of us as designers might do, we can get pretty far by mirroring a similar process that we use for picking type and color and making those be fitting for our brand and expressing specific messages. So, we can use those same tricks, apply them to motion, and kind of have our brand point of view through all those things. Because your design is going to be so much stronger when we're presenting that same message, not just from your type and color choices and copy, but also with your motion as well. So a couple of things, I guess like ground rules, maybe we could call them. We're going to be focusing mostly on UI animation, so the kind of animation that you might do if you're making apps or websites, the things that might end up in those flows, that kind of thing. I'm going to assume that you're doing the UX part super good already, that you are not the type of people that are like, did you know we can flip buttons in CSS so all your buttons just do this? If that's you, we should talk later. And we're going to be using motion and animation, those two words interchangeably, kind of not super correct, but for our purposes, totally the way it's going to go. Color will also have views in it, because that's also the way it's supposed to go, and I'm kind of not sorry. Okay. So let's talk about how we can define our brand in motion. Like, what kinds of things can we do in this space? How can we get that done? So when we defining our brand in motion, I feel like there's kind of three questions that are good to answer. We don't necessarily have to do them in this order, but we're going to do them in this order because it's the order that I wrote them in. We want to look at things like, how much do you rely on emotion in your messaging? And the answer that could be none. That's totally valid. You could decide, like, we don't animate anything ever. That is totally a valid design decision. That is a point of view. It's totally okay, as long as you came to that decision like on purpose. You weren't just like, nah, we forgot. Not an okay. What kind of qualities will match your messaging? You probably put a lot of work into making all those other design choices send a specific message, so we want to have motion fit into that too. And then where are you going to use motion? What kind of rules do you have around where it gets used, how much, and when, and all of those things? So a good way to start with this is to know how you describe yourself. And maybe not you as a person, but I'm thinking more as terms of brands or products that you might be working with. So a lot of good descriptive words are adjectives. I feel like me and Denise can make a nice Mad Lib between our two talks. She did like verbs and nouns. I'm like, adjectives. Yes. And those are things that we can find in a lot of different places, the things that describe the personality of our brand. You can find those in things like voice and tone documents, brand pillars. We generally have these kind of descriptive words that we use about our brands already. Voice and tone is one of my favorite places to find them. It turns out that the words we use to describe the kind of ways we should write with content and the voice we should have there usually translate really well to motion. So if you have voice and tone, just kind of steal it from those. And maybe like high five your content strategist when you do that. They're nice people. So I like having 3 because, I don't know, 3 is a good number. I feel like you want a short enough list that is something you can actually decide if you've hit that goal. And not so long. If you have 20 adjectives, like you just kind of turns into word soup and doesn't really work out. Also, not even grammatically a sentence. So maybe as we go through this, you can think of some adjectives that you might use to describe your brand or your product and kind of see where you fall within these examples. Or not, whatever. It's after lunch, cool. You can just pretend you have adjectives. I can't tell the difference. There's not like an adjective face or anything, but there could be. Anyways, so we'll kind of go through these questions as we go along. So one of the first things I like to do, and I don't usually do this with a scale, I usually kind of just like to talk through this, but it's easier to see on a slide with a scale, is to kind of think of, all right, so what sort of tolerance do we have for action with our brand personality? And I like to think of, when it comes to brand personality, of kind of thinking like, if this brand or product was a person, what kind of person would it be? I think that's a nice shortcut to getting you to those descriptive words. That works for me, maybe it works for you too. So maybe we'll look at things like, what kind of action tolerance do we have? From everything moving to nothing moving. We can be anywhere on that scale. And even the type of energy, I think, is a nice thing to think of kind of when you're just getting started with this, of like, okay, what sort of energy do we have? Are we serious? Are we super fun? Are we somewhere in between? Because there's a lot of ground in between. And if we had some adjectives, we could maybe put them on these scales, and we could be like, hey, if we were sort of like, I don't know, if we wanted to be like calm, probably not a lot of stuff moves, just things move a little bit. If we wanted to be confident, maybe we're somewhere in the middle. These are all like very much the kinds of things you can discuss or be subjective or however it's going to be. There's not like one right answer for any adjective on this scale, but I think it's useful to think of before we dig into some of the more details around the animations. If you're friendly, maybe you're going to have a little bit more moving. And if you were like, hey, actually, we're super annoying, just move everything all the time, forever and ever, looping endlessly. That was a trick one. If that was your adjective, we should talk later. It's like I'm just calling a bunch of people to the principal's office after my talk, like, I don't know. Anyways, thinking about the type of energy, and that's kind of the part we're going to dig into even more detail next, but it's sort of nice to have an idea of where you might go. So if you're super serious, maybe that's kind of like your idea of like wanting to project confidentness, if that's the way you would describe yourself. Maybe that's a more serious vibe than something that's more playful or fun. Maybe if we're calm, we're somewhere near serious, because like calm isn't exactly serious, but it's closer to serious than playful might be. It's kind of fun to plot these words in space. And if you're friendly, you're probably going to be on the more playful end, unless you're a really boring friend. Well, we won't go there. So having that set up, just kind of giving a sense of like what sort of things you might be where you might be looking to hit with the way you're going to use motion. Then we can dig into how we would express these particular adjectives or these personalities with motion, and really getting into how we accomplish that with the motion part of our design. So there's a few things we can control around animation that are basically how we style it, how we express things with animation. It's like through our easing choices. Are you going to ease in, out? You're going to bounce, you're going to spring. And I know spring is technically not easing, but that's okay for our purposes. It can be in this list. We can talk about physics later. And then also, like, those are generally keywords you might see in, CSS or any sort of tool you're using, and you're like, oh, that's kind of a short list. How do I be expressive with this? Those are really they can be specific curves in a specific tool, but they can also be an overarching category of easing. There's a whole group of easing that you could say is an ease in, and like, which one in that pile do you want? We'll find out soon. Are duration values offsets? How fast does something move? How quickly does the next thing move after it? How do they work together? How do you space those things out? There's definitely a very small range that we work with UI animation. Like, you don't really want to have, a button animation that takes a second or 2 seconds. That's significantly too long. But even within these few hundred milliseconds or tens of milliseconds, we can have some variation that can adjust the way these things feel. And then the properties that we animate, there's kind of 4 main things we tend to animate no matter what you're doing. And it's kind of cool when you realize this, because you're like, wait, even if I'm doing fancy video effects or like character animation or UI animation, there's generally 4 things you're animating, which is position, scale, opacity, and rotation. And you're like, whoa, almost every effect can be those things in some combination. We're all motion designers now. End of talk. No, just kidding. Oh wait, make it a component. That was what Brad said earlier. Anyways, the properties we animate can change the way things look. And we could have a very, very specific point of view. We could say, hey, we're never going to animate position. We're only going to animate opacity. Those decisions you make around those properties could have a very strong point of view and a very strong messaging throughout all of your design work. So those are some ways we can control the way animation works. So let's get into, with the way animation conveys. So let's get into some adjectives of how we might convey certain adjectives with these properties, looking at how we'd express that with animation. So I've come up with kind of a spectrum of personalities that brands might have. I decided to start with the calm one, because I know everyone just had lunch, so we'll start calm and easy, and then work our way up in like energy level. That seems to work, so we'll go with it. So if we wanted to have our animations, or we want to have our brand come off as calm, soft, and reassuring, we might be like, all right, we're going to pick some like rounded typefaces, some calm pastel colors. Maybe you give it a little more thought than that, most likely, but you get the idea. And then we're like, all right, so how are we going to make our motion match this personality we've got going on? And if we wanted to do that, some good things to turn to would be to use like animate opacity, soft blurs, small changes in movement. A thing moving from here to there is a very big movement, but it can move from here to there and basically suggest the exact same thing because now it's over here. It's like, I feel like, yeah, you get the idea. There will be more dancing, don't worry. Easing curves with gradual speed changes. The easing curves decide, or basically dictate, how an animation changes speed over the course of its duration. And if something takes 1 second or 100 milliseconds or whatever it is to get from here to there, there's almost infinite amount of speed changes, or at least a big long list of speed changes it could make to get there that will all make it feel a little bit different. So my favorite way to look at these things and to kind of investigate how to be expressive with motion is to make little motion studies and do things with simple shapes. Because I figure for one thing, I get distracted easily. I don't know if you've noticed. But it's nice to have this like simple shapes to work with to really focus on what the motion is doing. And then once you have something you like, you can put it in a more realistic atmosphere or in an actual layout and see how it holds up. But it helps you focus and kind of gets you thinking about the motion specifically and not so much about everything else around it. So if we did a little bit of a motion study for this with some circles, because circles are the best shape, I've literally just decided. We might do some things like fades that are maybe on the slow end of what's acceptable, where we're just like a little bit of fade, then we can scale and fade. Blur and fade. Ooh. Everything together. Oh wait, I should say that calmly. Everything together. Yeah. And now in slow motion, just to really get it across. So you can kind of see how these different properties are working together, how the scale and fade is working. And these are feeling pretty calm, pretty soft, especially with like the blurry edges, the soft edges, very subtle. Nothing is actually moving, even though we have a lot of animation going on. So we've got that kind of calmness with a lack of movement and these smaller, so a little bit slower, a little bit softer kind of feels. And when you're thinking about personalities like calm, soft, and subtle, those adjectives, you may not think that motion can do that, but like it totally can. Works on not circles as well. Squares, rectangles, triangles, every shape totally works. So we've gotten this across with a bit with the properties we've used. So for a lot of things like the blur, we went and we were like, hey, blur. I don't know if you've worked with blur stuff much, but blur looks really good at the beginning of a blur, and then when it's like full-on blur, it just kind of looks like a gross blur monster, which is generally not going to come off as calm. So we'll mix these properties together, and if we're animating blur, we'll just kind of like use opacity a little bit delayed afterwards. Just make that fade out. So pretty blur to gross blur, and we like pretty fade, so you don't see the gross blur. So we kind of got that calm feeling by the way we're mixing those properties together, just having that being a bit delayed, as well as the duration. So it's kind of like everything working together to create this calm feel. Of course, the easing is probably the biggest thing that communicates around when we're using motion, of just like how is this animation changing speed over the course of its action, whatever it might be. And I tend to recommend to people, like, hey, if you have a brand and you have like a brand personality you want to convey, you should come up with your own like basic 3 easing curves, your foundational 3 easing curves, like your own ease in, your own ease out, your own ease in out. It's really hard to say, even though I've done it a million times, but you get the idea. Yeah, say ease in and out 3 times. No, don't. And people are like, cool, that sounds great. And then they're like, okay, wait, where do I start? Because they're like, I've been to cubicbezier.com and this is what happens. You're like, doop a doop a doop a doop a doop. This video should have music, but I'll just sing for you. And you're like, I don't know, something's not right. Maybe I can fix it. want with those handles, you can make any curve that sticks to those two endpoints, and don't use this curve anywhere unless you want to go way down the brutalist rabbit hole. I mean, it's a thing, but no, don't. So it's, starting from a blank page where you could do anything you want, feels scary, it feels hard. I'm like, I get it. I've been there, it's tough. So instead of going with the defaults of being like, hey, let's just use the CSS defaults or whatever it might be, if our choices are between defaults and like making it up on our own, there's a nice little place in the middle, which is a set of easing equations known as the Penner easing equations, and these are some of them. They're nice. I like them as a starting point for folks because it's not a blank page. You can still manipulate the curves if you're like, this is close, not exactly what I want, and start like going down diving into that world of easing and all the things you can do. But they're a nice set of curves that have three things that make them really useful for us. They're designed to look good, which is not always true for the default options in some of the various coding areas we might be in. So they're purposely designed to look good. They come in families of threes. So there's like the sine family of the ease in, ease out, and ease in out. And then you have the quad family. I'm pretty sure I'm the only one that calls them families. People have more like smart names for them, but whatever. So you know that if you're using the ease in sign and the ease out sign together, they're going to look good together. So that's cool. And they also exist in pretty much every kind of programming environment that exists out there. These ones that we're seeing right here are from easings.net, which is an approximation of them made for cubic Beziers, because that's what we use in CSS. They also exist in processing, open frameworks, of every kind of JavaScript you've ever seen in your life. They're all there in pretty much every animation library you've seen as well. So they're kind of a nice common ground between design and developers as well. Anything that you've seen that has like exponential easing or power easing, it's the Penner easing equations with a different name. Because get it, sine is 3, quad 4. Math, love it. So the things that these do, these are little motion graphs, and they always plot the progression of an animation against time. Where the graph is flattest, the rate of change is slowest. If we were moving a thing from here to there, it's moving the slowest. And where they're steepest, the rate of change is fastest. So if we're moving a thing from here to there, it's going to be going fastest. It can be applied to any property. They're normalized between the numbers of 0 and 1, so you can apply it to any duration of any length, and it's pretty cool. So you can see that the ones near the top left are kind of a little flat, right? There's not a lot of changes there. It's kind of a very subtle change in the curve. And we go all the way down to the bottom right, you're just like, whoa, it's like a hockey stick on top of a other hockey stick facing the other way. I need a better description for that. But it's very drastic. We have very flat, very steep versus a nice subtle curve. So we can get a range of expression from these. And if you want to see them actually in motion, these 6 circles all have the same duration, move the same distance with different equations. So we have our sine, then our quad. Oh, it helps if I start them. We have our sine for real, then our quad, then our cubic, then our quart, quint, expo. And when we get to the last one, it feels like it's moving faster with those greater dynamic changes in the speed, even though they are all the same duration. I know, because I made them. And I would never lie to you. It's weird, because you're like, wait, would she? I wouldn't. Anyways, so that's how we can get like a nice range of expressiveness, a set of defaults that aren't really like programmatic defaults, kind of nice set of defaults we can start from, a nice place to start that's not a blank page. If we were going to apply some Penner easing equations to this idea of expressing some soft, calm, reassuring feel, we could do that maybe with some of the more flatter curves. So a super flat curve is a 1-to-1 ratio, which is linear easing, means you're changing the same rate of speed the entire time, generally looks super robotic and boring. Probably don't want that. But our sine just has a little bit of a curve, so it's going to have a little bit of a speed up before it goes on the ease in. And it's going to slow down nice and subtly with the ease out. It's going to feel nice and calm. And maybe we could even go like one step up, just a little bit more severe with the quads, have a little bit more of a speed change there. And something in that range or some customization between the two, whatever you want to do, is probably going to get you that feel. And then you'll be like, yes, I did motion design, I'm the best. No, it's pretty, yeah, you actually could say that. I'm giving you permission to say that in your next design review. You're like, I'm the best. Just do it, it's fine. So if we go one more step up in our kind of spectrum of personalities you might want to express, something that's maybe a little step up in energy from calm, we'll go to confident and then stable and strong. Something that's maybe a little more grounded, because calm is kind of soft, right? That's subtle. You're confident, stable, and strong. You're there. You're very confident. You're doing things, and I feel like some of these adjectives you can just feel the emotion in them. You're just like confident, yes, and you're like, okay, this is a good adjective to use. So if we wanted to do that, we might lean towards things that have very direct movements and straight lines, right? If you're confident, you're like, I'm going over there. I'm here. That's confident. If you're like, I'm going over, oh, I'm here, I think. Not so confident. Um, also, dance in meetings as much as you can. Totally works good. So having those straight lines, direct movements, going to where you're going and knowing that the things don't really know stuff, but knowing that you're going there. Symmetrical movements, like symmetrical ease and outs, where you're speeding up the same way you're slowing down in the end. Like an easing curve, you could literally fold in half. Tends to feel very confident and stable because symmetry, stableness, all of those things. Probably want to avoid blurs and bounces and overshoots because all of those things are going to not feel as confident. It's going to feel like you didn't know where you were going. Blurs are a little too soft. Bounces, it's tough to pull off a confident bounce. It can be done, but there's this bank I use, and when you transfer money, they have this modal that comes down. So you're like, I'm transferring money to pay my rent and stuff, and it's like, boom, bloom, bloom, transfer complete. And you're just like, great bounce, but why is my bank bouncing? Like that. As I was saying, I just realized that bouncing and banks is not a good combination. It's not confident, it's not stable, it's just kind of freaking me out. So, and it's not that motion is bad, it just doesn't fit with the general mood of banking and their branding in general. I've noticed that every time I go, the bounce gets more and more subtle. So I figure in about 6 months, it'll be perfect. It'll just be like, boom. I'll be like, yes. I'll let you all know when that happens. So a little bit of a motion study instead of my bank tangent. If we want to do that with circles, we could have our fade just be a little bit quicker. Maybe instead of 150 milliseconds, we're like 125, 100 milliseconds, just a little bit more of a kind of thing. It's a quicker, more decisive fade. Scale and fade, of course, we did that last time. And really direct movements of going exactly where we're going to be and just ending up there in a straight line, no extra energy, just doing exactly what we said we're going to do. These also play in slow motion, but I think you get the idea. Nope, I'm going to make you watch it. There's only one more. It's almost there. Yeah, it's the same but slower. Yup. And everyone's like, yeah, that's what slow motion is? Anyways. To kind of get that more of that feel, that stronger, more confident feel in the easing, using these more drastic curves, like if we go up to the cubics, and kind of, which, just random aside, my favorite Penner easing equation, if any of you were wondering. If you want to get me an easing curve for my birthday or something, this is the one. Cubes are great. Anyways, this one's a little more drastic, right? If we remember our sine, the sine one almost looks straight. This one's definitely more of a ramp up. So we're going to have a nice, pretty noticeable speed up there throughout that movement if we actually are moving. Our ease out cubic, same idea on the other end. Ease in out cubic is just like ease in with ease out stacked on top. Perfect. Kind of gives us this more dramatic feel. We could even go one step further to quart, which is just a little bit more severe as far as the dramatic of that rate change, that speed change if we're moving. Just feels a little bit more kind of like a snappier feel to it, where the calm and soft ones, the sines, are kind of like, I'm fading. The quarts and the sine and the cubics rather are more like, I'm fading. And you get, yeah. One day you will all talk like this, and then you'll be like, damn her. But that more dramatic change in speed just feels that much more confident. It feels like it has that bit more of a kick to it. So if we go one more step up in our kind of range of personality traits, maybe we want to get to something that's more lively, energetic, and friendly. Instead of trying to be, we want the kind of energy we have, but not in such a stable way, in a more energetic way, which might feel a little bit more variable, a little bit more buzzy, if you will. And we can get that with doing things like using overshoots, using anticipation, or snappier easing curves, which is totally a technical term for just things that have greater, faster speed changes. It's not a technical term. It is now. I've made it one. So overshoots are a thing where we basically go past where we're going. Where we're like, I'm going over there, and you're like, whoop. Actually, it's easier to do left to right. We're like, I'm going over there, and you're like, woo, I'm here, and you just kind of overshoot a little bit. Anticipation is when we see it all the time in cartoons, which is exactly where it comes from, where if you've ever watched old cartoons, if Bugs Bunny was going to run over there, first he would do this, or actually he would do this, and then he would run, and that's the anticipation. This movement in the opposite direction to just tell you what's going on. It's kind of like a winding up of energy and then releasing it, and overshoots are kind of like, I've had so much energy, woo, oh, wow, yeah. It's like the hungover kind of easing. You know how they tell you not to say the things that come to your mind without thinking them through first? That's one of them. All right, so how will we pull that off with some circles? Some overshoots on our circles to give it just that bit more energy, where we have, it's just going to go a little past, just a little bit, and back down. Overshoots in the scale. Scale's a great one to do overshoots. Just gives that kind of squishy feel. Anticipation, the opposite. Both together, because once you've done one, why not? And that tends to be a way that they get used together a lot. A lot of things that might exit the screen with anticipation, it's just like, hey, I'm leaving, will come back in and be like, hey, I'm here. And that just has. But there's so much we can do with the way that wind-up happens for anticipation or the way that overshoot happens for the overshoots. Like, how far past its destination does it go? How quickly does it snap into its position? So many places we can go to really fine-tune exactly the energy that conveys. Oh, and I have this one in slow motion too, in case you were wondering. It's like slow motion, yep, same but slower. Dun, 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 our overshoots, our scale. One thing that doesn't work super well is overshooting opacity, because that just doesn't mathematically work. But great for scale, rotation, positioning, all those kinds of things. So it's okay, opacity. You can do other things. We still love you. So for that more energetic feel, we can use these even more drastic curves. But there's something that we can do with our cubic Bezier curves to give us this sense of anticipation or overshoots. Anything that shoots at the bottom of the curve, right, progression of animation against time, if you are going below your starting point, you're going to go backwards, right? So anything that dips below is going to give you anticipation. Anything that pops out above is going to give you an overshoot. Anything that does both is going to give you both. And these ones are some Penner-Ising equations. The back functions, I think, are the only Penner-Ising equations that really do this. You can use them as a starting point to make your own, because any curve that kicks out the top will give you overshoots, and all of these are going to look very different. Like that one, barely going over the top. That other one, just a little like nub. The other one's kind of more like a fountain. And these will all give you a different feel of how it goes past and forwards. And in the opposite direction, I'll give you a different feel for anticipation. And you can do this by moving any of the cubic Bezier handles. Don't worry, this one works out better than the first one. We're like, that's an overshoot. And if we decide to do it with the handle number 1, also an overshoot, but a different kind. It's really fun. You will all spend the rest of your day on this site just being like, what else can I do? Everything. It's my favorite part of the internet, aside from like puppy pictures. So we can also get overshoots anticipation by the keyframes that we use as well. We can do it with Ising curves. That gives us a certain amount of control. But those 2 points in our Ising curves with cubic Beziers are fixed. And sometimes that runs you into some weird little hiccups that you don't like. So we can also do overshoots by telling and it works for anticipation as well, but we'll just show one and you can just assume the opposite. Instead of telling the object to go like from there to over here, or from here to over there, however you might say it, you can be like, go from here to over there and then over there. And then it's like, oh, you can actually tell it where to go, and then you can have more control between those keyframes of how that bounce back or how that anticipation will work. And if we play it through with a slightly chunky keynote animation, you get the idea. It's like, dump, bump. Works better when you use something a little smoother than keynote, but it's okay. You totally get it. So getting that sense of energy, the overshoots anticipation, really gives you that more lively feel. It would feel weird if you're trying to be like confident and stable. So that might be one of those things that if you tried to do a really severe overshoot animation and your brand is confident and stable, you're like, oh, I just can't get motion right. And kind of thinking about what the Ising curves are saying can help you fix what might seem not quite to fit or might feel a little bit odd. So let's go full on far end of the spectrum. We've all woken up enough. Let's be playful, fun, and lighthearted, because that's me. Yeah. We can use things like bounces, shape morph, squash and stretch. We can really kind of go all out there with our various animation techniques because we have this room to be playful. Kind of when we were thinking about that action tolerance at the very beginning, if you realize like, hey, we are a fun, friendly, playful brand, there's going to be a lot more room to work with, a lot more techniques you can throw in there that are still going to fit with the overall messaging you're trying to go for. When you're on the more like less motion tolerant end of things, you have to be a little bit more conservative with what you use to get your message across, so you're not like kind of creating mixed messages. So if we wanted to go and do these, it's fun to do this stuff with circles. We're like, let's bounce stuff. Yes, we can elasticify things. Also a word, totally a word. I don't think it's a word. Morphing shapes, the best one. Squash and stretch. And those first two, the bounce and elastic, there are Penner equations for each of those. Those ones we saw are Penner-Ising equations. The one that's elastic might make you think more of springs. It's kind of like got this oscillating look to it. And unfortunately, with the Penner-Ising equations, there really only is one defined elastic sort of feel. But if you want to go for that, you totally want to dive into springs, where you can do things like affect the tension and the friction and all those things to affect how it bounces and how it oscillates. And it's just a super fun place to be. So that's kind of a place you might want to branch out if that's a look that fits what you need to convey. Bouncing, the same kind of idea, depending on we can use the Penner-Ising equation, like cubic Bezier equivalent in CSS, but if we want to have a different bounce or kind of a change how it bounces, how many times it bounces, that's the kind of thing we need to go into some various JavaScript easing and some of the more like advanced mathy easing. It's like cubic Beziers are sort of like the gateway drug of easing, because you start on them and you're like, these are the best. And you're like, wait, there's more. And then you just never come back again. That makes it sound scary. It's not. It's really awesome. But they're a great way to get started. Morphing, of course, always awesome. It really changes the way the object feels. It starts feeling soft and malleable as opposed to being rigid and stiff. Like all of those circles we saw before, we assume they were a rigid circle. As soon as they start changing shape, they have this like kind of soft, playful feel. And squash and stretch is one that we don't see a lot in interfaces, partly I think because it's hard to do well. But if you do it well, it takes a little practice, and even very subtle amounts can have a really big change on how that motion is conveyed. So I've got one more chart for you because charts are serious? Yeah. So we talked a little bit about like kind of figuring out our motion tolerance of how much we want to do, how we're going to use the various properties of animation to convey the messages we want to convey. In the same way, we might think about how the properties of a typeface convey the messages we want to convey. But I think one other thing to consider, and it was that last question on our list, is like where do we use motion and how much do we use in certain contexts? Because that can really change things. So this is a fancy looking chart, and the type is really small, but so sorry about that. But essentially, what we're looking at is what kind of tasks or events might happen in an interaction. If you were thinking of a specific product, what might happen in that specific product. And I think it's kind of helpful to, in this case, this graph plots how often that event might occur. So like if it repeats none amounts, it's near zero. If it repeats like a billion, thousand, million amounts, or infinitely, or potentially infinitely, be the top there. And then just how positiveness of that event, because I think that really affects where we can get away with being most expressive in our work. So if something is like zero amounts of positiveness, it's like a terrible, horrible thing, probably not a good place to like insert a bunch of expressiveness. That's usually when people get mad at you. When it's something that's very positive, there's more places to be expressive. And you can kind of get a feel for this when we plot some of these things. So like error messages, pretty negative, hopefully doesn't happen often. If that's not near the bottom of the frequency chart, we should talk after class. That's a problem. Things like getting your first sale, that's super positive and can only happen once, right? At least once per thing you have to sell. Getting new subscribers, pretty positive, could hopefully happen really frequently. I hope it does. Maybe it depends on how good you are at subscribing. These all don't go fit in one particular product, just some generic tasks and things. Editing a series of transactions, you probably have to do that a whole lot. It's not really negative, but it's not really positive. So that's probably a place where you want to have animation that's more there for utility versus being expressive. So we can kind of figure out where these lines are based on the task that might happen in the product you're working on. And then things like entering article content, I feel like that's kind of in the middle, right? You're like, I have the content, I'm putting it in there. I like articles, they're good, but I had to put all this text in there. That's not so good. There's kind of all these different places that stuff can fall. And maybe as one last one, like setting up your account. Probably not going to happen very often. Maybe it should be even further into the uniqueness spectrum. But it's also pretty positive, but it might not be as positive as getting your first sale. So you can kind of think of how all these various events over the course of like a user flow or a particular task flow might happen. Then we can kind of put these in buckets and be like, all right, okay, so stuff here that is pretty negative and it repeats often, we probably want to stick to things that are very utility-based, some like utilitarian type motion, things that are about getting stuff done, helping you be productive, not a place to be super expressive. If we have things that are very positive and they repeat somewhat often or very often, that's where we can have a little bit more room to be expressive, right? But it's still, we know it's going to happen fairly often, so maybe don't just go all out there. For things that are more negative and more unique, that's probably something where maybe you decide you don't use animation at all. You're just like, hey, no personality expressed here, just get you out of this mess. And then this last one, this is where you might have room for even more bigger expressiveness to express even more personality because it's something that's unique and something that's very positive, and that's a place you can kind of celebrate with who's ever using your stuff. And of course, the lines aren't super as they're a little more blended. They're not as hard stops. It's like you get to decide where these things change and where you might use motion that's more of utility and more expressive, and the way you split that up and the way you use motion in these different contexts is really going to affect the way the messaging comes across as well. So fun stuff to think about, I think, anyways. And hopefully that's been a useful kind of delve into the world of animation so you can get a feel for what kinds of, how you can make animation be expressive like you might with your type and color and everything else, and how you might be able to make these guidelines or even new fancy tools like they were talking about earlier this morning to help your team make these decisions faster. You know, you could go through all the stuff that we looked at today, finding the adjectives, doing a little bit of motion study, something you could do fairly quickly if you needed to. You spend a little bit of time and you've got a good starting point. And then when you can delve even deeper into the fun depths of animation around like choreography and all this stuff, and there's so many more places to go, but I'll spare you the having to make you super obsessed with animation. Just little doses at once. That's how I'll get you. I'm working on sounding more threatening. Is it working? Don't think so. So like Marcy, I want to leave you with some places to go. If going through this, you're like, oh, I don't know any adjectives for my brand. These two books have some really great exercises in them. Conversational Design by Erica Hall, you might be like, that sounds like it's about chatbots. Not exactly. She's got a whole chapter with these really great like Mad Lib style exercises, so Denise would totally approve, that help you kind of narrow down like what is my brand personality, what are these adjectives that I would use. She's talking about it more for writing content, but it works super well, and there's similar exercises in designing for emotion as well. Like Brad mentioned, I wrote this book on designing interface animation. If you want to explore some more of the UX side of things and look at cute dog pictures, this is the book for you. It is. See, look, cute dog. She's mine. You can't have her. That doesn't even make sense. I also have also happy to chat about this anytime on Twitter or even here. I'm around for the whole rest of the conference. There's so much more to talk about with motion, and I am perfectly happy to obsess about it with you and talk about it endlessly. So thanks so much for listening.